what if you have a tape measure but no pencil, or maybe you dropped your pencil and it's really hard to go pick it up? I'm going to show you a trick to use the hook on a tape measure to make a mark. So normally we would pull a measurement, let's pull a measurement here at about 7 inches and we would make a mark. But you forgot your pencil, or maybe you dropped it and it's really inconvenient. What we can do is spin the tape measure around and hold the measurement on the edge, let's say that same 7 inches here, and you'll notice now the hook is over here. Now if we make a slight impression with the hook, we have the exact same mark. Now, if you were to get your pencil again, and you needed to make that mark a little bit deeper so you could see it, you can go ahead and darken the mark. This works really well as long as you can reach the edge of your board, whatever you're trying to measure against. If it's a long measurement, it doesn't work very good. If you're making repetitive measurements, this can actually be a real time saver, because if you're taking the same 7 inches and you have to make another 7-inch mark, instead of pulling your tape measure out to, say, 14 inches, what you can do is hold your tape measure at 7 inches here and just make another mark with the hook. And there's another 7-inch mark, and simply repeat this process over and over again to very quickly make repetitive measurements. You can actually use this same trick to speed up making lines. For example, if you're trying to cut the edge off of something like with this wall board, instead of having to get a tape measure, pull a line, make a mark, pull a line, make a mark, and then connect the lines and make the cut, you can simply grab your tape measure and hold your finger at the measurement. So in this case, let's go for 3 inches. Okay, so we'll pull 3 inches out on the tape measure here, and we can just put pressure on the hook. And we want to make sure that we have a little bit of tension on the hook, see, because we don't want that to be a false measurement. And as we go down, we just drag our finger there along the 3-inch mark. And we're leaving a mark behind in the wallboard here. It's a little bit hard to see, but you can see that we've left a mark. If you wanted to, you could darken the mark, but I'm going to show you a couple more tricks so you don't have to. What we can do is take a sharpened carpenter pencil like this one and place it behind the hook on the tape measure, and we can go ahead and just make a line without having to darken it again. So we've got the pencil behind the hook, and we've got the tape measure set to 3 inches. And there is a nice perfect 3-inch line. Now, if you're just trying to cut this off instead of just make a mark, we can skip the marking step altogether and go straight for a utility knife. We can hook that in there behind the hook on the tape measure and go ahead and just make a scoring cut. Now, you don't want to go deep with this cut because you want it to be fairly accurate. It's just there to leave a small cut. So what we do is hook it on 3 inches. We're behind the hook on the tape measure, and we can just drag this down. And we've left just the slightest little scoring cut. Now we can come back and deepen the cut and make our final break. So let's say you're trying to measure something up high and you don't want to go get a ladder, but when you put the tape up there, you can't really read it because it's so far away that you can't get a really accurate measurement off of whatever it is that you're trying to measure. I'm going to show you a simple trick to bring that measurement down so that we can read it. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the tape measure and flip it around and pull a measurement from up high and bring it down to something like in this area where it would be easy for us to measure up from the floor. And we want to use some sort of easy to remember measurement that would be easy to add to the measurement from the floor. So if we start up high here, so let's come down to 50 inches and let's make a mark here. And then what we can do is we can reverse the tape measure from the floor and measure up to our mark. In this case, it's 61¼ inches. All we need to do is add 50 to 61¼ and that's our measurement. In this case, it's 111¼ exactly. And because we can get a ladder, let's climb up there and check. Looks like 111¼ perfect. We can actually use that exact same trick, but on a much smaller scale to work out the dimensions of the inside of something. This could be the inside of a box, or maybe the distance between like a toilet and a cabinet, or like this, kind of the inside of a stud bay, and we want to know the inside dimension. The problem is that when you bring your tape measure in here, you're going to get this small little radius inside here, and it can be very difficult, if you've ever tried this, to make a perfect cut. No matter what you do, you put the board in there, it never fits. It's either too big or too small. But using the same trick, we can work out the exact inside dimension. So what we can do is pull an inside measurement to something that's easy to remember, just like we did on the wall. So in this case, let's pull a measurement here to 5 inches and go ahead and make our mark. And now what we can do is reverse the tape measure and measure away from the other side and give ourselves a total dimension. It looks like we're at about 7 and just a slight smidgen underneath a quarter there. So that would be 5 plus 7 1/4 is 12 and 1/4 inches. Because we can, let's go ahead and check to make sure that that's correct. And I see 12 and 1/4 inches exactly. So next I want to show you how to use your tape measure without needing a calculator. And then we're going to talk about how to use the tape measure as a calculator. So let's take a sample project. Let's say that you wanted to hang some coat hooks on this board. Let's say that we want 3 coat hooks here. We want them in the center of the board and we want the hooks to be evenly spaced. We can do all of that with a tape measure and no calculator. So the first trick that we need to know is how to divide the board in half. We can use the same trick to divide a board into thirds or even quarters. What we're going to do is take the tip of the tape measure and lay it on the edge of the board, and we're going to go across the board diagonally until we get a measurement that's easy to divide in half on the other edge. So in this case, let's take a measurement. Let's actually go all the way out here to 12. It's very easy to cut in half, and we can make a mark here at 6. And now if we move our board and our tape measure down and we make the same mark on the other side, now we can connect both of our marks and we'll have the center of our board. To verify that we're correct, we can simply pull a measurement here, 2 and a big 5/8, and we have 2 and a big 5/8. But now we have the problem of dividing this into equal segments to put our hooks evenly spaced. This is where we can use the tape measure as a sort of calculator. So let's measure our board. The problem is we don't really know what 27 divided by 4 is. So what we can do is take the hook of the tape measure and we can line it up with 27. And what we're going to do is we're going to divide 27 in half. And if we take this small bend in the tape measure, your eye can pretty much see where the center of that bend is. And if you look really closely, we can tell that the middle, or this number, 27, divided in half is 13 and a half. So we can mark the middle of our board here at 13 and a half, but that's going to give us 2 segments. We want 4 segments. So we need to do the same thing with 13 and a half. So we take the hook of our tape measure and we set it to 13 and a half. And then we look at this curve in the tape measure. And if you look really closely, it looks like the curve is at about 6 3/4. 6 3/4 is half of 13 and a half. So now we can measure 4 equal segments of 6 3/4. But hold on a second. Let's say that you don't know how to add 6 3/4, 6 3/4, and 6 3/4. What you can do is make your initial mark here, and then you can bring the tape measure hook back down here. And let's use the hook, but you could also do this from the 1 mark, and that's going to remove some amount of error in the hook. We can set the hook here, and then we can make another mark at 6 3/4. And then we can simply repeat that process, 6 3/4. And now we have 4 equal segments, 1, 2, 3, 4. And so we could now put our coat hooks where we have the center line and evenly spaced. 3 coat hooks with no calculator. So we've already seen how you can use a tape measure as a calculator. We used it for division though. We used it to break up something into half and then into quarters. But did you know that you can use a tape measure to add and subtract? So let's give an example. Let's say that you have a wall that's 157 inches long. 157 inches. And now you also know that you need to put something on that wall that's 71 inches from the end of the wall. Unless you can do the math, 71 from 157, it's going to take you a while. But let me show you how to use the tape measure to make that calculation. Okay, so we have the hook and 157 together. And if we come back to the 71 here on the tape measure, we can see that 157 minus 71 is 86. So we can see the tape measure works for subtraction, but what about addition? Well, this one's a little bit easier if you have 2 tape measures. So let's take a measurement here. Let's say 19 inches. So we're going to start measuring over here. And let's add 13 inches to that. If we simply grab a second tape measure and let's add it to 19 inches here and let's pull it out, we can see that 13 inches over here would be 32 inches. We can do this same process with a single tape measure, but it is a little bit harder. especially if the measurements are close together. So if we take the 13 here and we line it up with the 19 and we look, we get 32 inches. Let's now look at how to use a tape measure as a square. Let's say you're trying to build something like this. Maybe this is a wall, or it could be a cabinet or a picture frame, or even something as big as a house. But we don't have the ability, for whatever reason, to use a square. So we've got our object here. Let's pretend this is a wall. And we just want to make sure that when we build it, it's not out of shape like a parallelogram or something like that, that it's overall square. What we're going to do is use the Pythagorean theorem to make sure that this is square. The theorem says that if one side of a triangle is 3, the other side is 4, then the hypotenuse or the diagonal is 5, and a tape measure can do that for us. Now this rule applies whether this is 30 feet, 40 feet, and 50 feet, or 300 feet, 400 feet, 500 feet. You can see how the theorem holds no matter the size of the object. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to make a mark on one side of our object at 3 inches. So let's just choose this side over here because we can. So let's go to 3 inches, and we want to make sure this is all following the outside of this shape. So let's make a mark here at 3 inches. And on the other side here, we're going to go to 4 inches. Again, it has to be on the outside edge. If you don't get it there, it's going to come out and give you an incorrect measurement. So 4 inches. Okay, perfect. So we've got 3, 4. And now what we can do is measure across these two to 5 inches. And I'm going to confuse you a little bit because I'm going to measure off of the 1 over here because I don't want the hook here to give me some kind of error. So if I measure off the 1, I'm going to go to the 6 mark. And what we want looking for is for the hypotenuse, or this angle here, to be 5 inches exactly. And what we can do is adjust. Wow, that's crazy. So that's already 6 inches perfectly, which means it's square. Let's make this one out of whack just so we can show the example. So let's make it super out of square. And this process on something as small like this is going to show a very small margin of error. So it's good to take your time and be precise. On something much larger, you have more room for fixing. So in this case, this is just a little bit under 6 inches here. It's very slight, like maybe a 32nd of an inch. And so we can make a correction to get it to 6 inches on the money. And let's check one more time to make sure that we're on. Okay, it looks like we're perfect at 6 inches. So from 1 to 6 is 5 inches. And now let's use a square to see if this is in fact square. Look at that, looks really good.